Welcome to the first ever Marketing Engineers interview series. I'm Patrick Lynch, Vice President of CFG Media and Technology. Today we're joined by Parin Mody from StratMg. Parin, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Pat.
So Parin, can you tell me a little bit about your background and kind of what you guys do over there at our friends at StratMg?
Absolutely, thank you. So StratMg is a demand generation firm targeted specifically to manufacturing industry. We've been in business for about 10 years, and our expertise lies primarily in helping manufacturing companies with go-to-market strategies and marketing execution and sales alignment.
Great. And I know we worked together on a variety of projects. And you spoke at our previous Marketing Engineers event. So a lot of our clientele and manufacturers in our side of things should be aware of you. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity, as usual.
Sure. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we really wanted to get your feedback on a variety of different questions, kind of your experience, maybe some key takeaways that the marketers could learn from. And we'll just start a little bit just on kind of your background. So what sparked kind of your interest in marketing? And did you always see yourself as a marketer in your industry, or kind of what started the original trend for you?
Actually, always no. I come from a voice over IP telecom background. So I'm certainly an engineer at heart, and marketing was the antithesis of engineering at some point. But I think with the advent of a technology and the incorporation of behavioral science into technology, it changes the paradigm. And not just that from a marketing department standpoint, but more so by evening the playing field for small, mid-sized, and large enterprises. So that whole shift is extremely intriguing, and that's what brought me in. So now marketing is more of a scientific art, which is extremely fascinating.
Absolutely. So, on that topic, so what other trends are you seeing in the industry related to marketing? Kind of what's everything shifting towards, in your opinion?
Actually, so I think in 2020, with the advent of a pandemic, there were a lot of ambiguity. So there were certainly a lot of knee-jerk reactions as well. So from a trend standpoint, if we look at a data point of 2020, we certainly saw a shift in the pendulum in terms of a sense of urgency, a sense to fill the sales pipeline right away. And I'm assuming that's true for almost everybody listening in as well. And I'm assuming you are hearing the same thing. So that certainly happened. But I think going forward in 2021, we expect some of those ad hoc knee-jerk reactions to kind of get grounded back to reality. So in other words, we're now looking at emphasis on how a marketing department operates, and there is a significant shift. So from 2020, I do believe that there are things that are here to stay. For example, the significance on customer experience. For example, how a company does business, how they go to market. I think buyer criteria has now changed from just quantitative, such as your product line, your key differentiating factors, your engineering skill set, to coupling that with qualitative factors as well. Things such as what's the purpose of your company, what's the brand identity, what's the story of your company. And given that, how seamlessly do you integrate into your customers' processes? How responsive are you? How transparent are you? So we're seeing a lot of those qualitative metrics being used in buyer criteria as well. So we believe that is here to stay. And lastly, I think 2020 was a catalyst for a marketing department to clearly track ROI. And we think that that's here to stay as well.
So you mentioned, related to both, kind of attributing ROI and marketing automation systems. I think that you and I have talked about that there's vast potential with marketing automation software, but it feels like, generally speaking, that marketers have a tendency to struggle to optimize it. Do you have any theories as to why, or in your experience, kind of why people struggle to optimize marketing automation software?
I think because sometimes people believe that marketing automation platform is like a silver bullet. And it can be. I mean, the easiest way for me to explain it is I associate that with a Ferrari. A Ferrari is as good as the driver of the Ferrari. The engine needs to do its things. The driver needs to do its thing. So a lot of times, people don't always do the due diligence upfront in terms of choosing the right platform. And sometimes, if we kind of skip that step, there is a domino effect, and it kind of proliferates down. The second thing is also understanding what it takes to drive that Ferrari. A lot of times there is a disconnect between the in-house skill set, the bandwidth available in-house to allocate to an automation platform. Sometimes the ability to have somebody be a strategist who can map out a lead life cycle to then be able to implement it are not always thought through. And I think it's some of those voids that kind of create some of these bigger challenges than it needs to be.
Mm. And you mentioned some of the, misconceptions about it. And I look at the marketing automation process, or, kind of the marketing and sales funnel as a process. And marketing automation is certainly one of the tools in that process. But we take a step out of kind of the tactical and the tools and say, okay, the entire sales and marketing process, from top to bottom, in your opinion, what's currently operating at the most efficient, and what is maybe the most inefficient part of the entire funnel that you see right now?
I think marketing automation platform has crossed the chasm. So in other words, it is become more adapted, more widely adapted. And I think that's where that efficiency comes in, when the whole platform stays within the marketing department, and to get the whole lead life cycle from the first touch to a sales qualified lead stage, so to speak. And because of that, now you have a clear visibility across all your marketing investments, all the way from your top of the funnel channel, whether it is SEO, social media, AdWords, LinkedIn, whatever, all the way down to nurture and verification. So we do believe that because there is no interdependency, that gives a very good holistic view. It allows you to track the effectiveness of your spend. So that works very well. People understand that. People understand the significance of it, and they've enhanced their performance because of it. I think when it comes to dependence with teams on the other side of things is where the bigger challenges come in. And that process isn't always ironed out for a variety of reasons. And that's where that inefficiency or a challenge, maybe is a better word in my world, that comes into play, where you have different departments having different procedures, and now you're trying to cross-pollinate information in an automated fashion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think from our experience at CFP Media, we've seen people invest heavily in content marketing, marketing automation software, and CRM systems. And I think that MarTech investment happened over the last decade plus. We've seen it, we've helped people with it, but I think a lot of people have purchased marketing automation system, and it's kind of sitting on the shelf, so to say. So if, from a hypothetical perspective, if I'm a marketer and I invested in marketing automation system a few years prior, and maybe it's been gathering dust sitting on the shelf, what are some ways that I can kind of dust it off here, at the start of 2021, and really say, okay, I'm going to focus on the next 6 months. Here's a few steps I can get started to kind of dust off my marketing automation system that doesn't feel too overwhelming, because I think getting started, like in any process or journey, is often the hardest part. But once you're in it, you kind of get a little momentum, and there's some ground support both at the company and at the individual level. So tell me, for the marketers listening, what are the 3 easy steps to kind of get started with dusting off their marketing automation system?
I think you put it well, Pat. In baseball analogy, it's hardest to get the first run on the board. And I think there are, if I think about it, there are at least 2 or 3 things you can do kind of right away without having to reinvent the whole process or anything like that. I think the first thing that I would look at beyond anything is personalization. If you've got emails that you're sending out, if you've got landing pages or microsites, even a website, if you can personalize them to the best you can from a job function standpoint, industry standpoint, value proposition standpoint, context standpoint. Those are probably going to yield you the best results without having to retool a whole lot. So personalization is definitely number one. The second piece I say is lead scoring. But a lot of times, what we have seen is marketing determines how to score a lead based on what they believe are high value actions, engagements, or whatever. But in reality, you want to integrate your sales team into that process because at the end of the day, they're going to pick up where you leave off as a marketing team. So you want to understand what is their entry criteria. How do they determine a lead is qualified and take that feedback on board to then score the lead as well. So that way you've got both marketing and sales kind of giving you feedback on how a lead should be scored. Again, that's relatively easily done if you have the right inputs from sales and marketing to say, how do you want to score a lead? Because your output in terms of the quality of lead you generate may not necessarily meet your quantity that you want to target, but the quality is certainly going to be extremely high, which will allow you to build credibility within the organization's internal organizations. And then it becomes a snowball effect. Then it becomes more of a matter of scaling things, right? So you want to do that. And then the last piece is sales enablement. So if you've taken the feedback from sales in terms of how you want to score a lead, you want to make sure that when you're sending a sales qualified lead over to sales, you're sending all that information. Even though the platforms may be disparate from a CRM to an automation platform standpoint, find a way to send them the information in terms of engagements that have happened and so on and so forth. So a salesperson gets that credibility and a comfort factor that a lead is being sent to them for a particular reason. Plus, they also know how to follow up. So if you think about it from a prospect experience standpoint, they see a congruent experience across the organization. And it kind of works both from a conversion rate standpoint, but at the same time, from an integration between marketing and sales standpoint, and establishing credibility for marketing in an organization.
I think it's all great advice. I think that using some of those kind of building blocks, let's say I start my program and it's 3 months in, 6 months in, maybe everything hasn't turned into business opportunity yet in terms of one business, but we've started the campaigns, they've begun, I've collaborated with sales to try to figure out, what is the difference between just a soft, MQL versus kind of a more business opportunity in the form of an SQL. What metrics should I be looking at? Like, what are some data columns to say, is this working? Right? Because I think one of the misconceptions about marketing is you kind of set it and forget it. You have this plan and you say, okay, we're going to do it. When I think that we've all learned that to try things out and to iterate in the moment is probably more of the realistic nature of marketing nowadays, is that there is no such thing as this linear path. So looking at the metrics and saying, okay, I haven't won business yet, but here's the things I should look at to tell if it's working. What do you believe those are?
Absolutely. And again, these platforms are so sophisticated that they can give you anything you want. They can answer any question you have. But to your earlier point, if you want to just start out at a 30,000 foot view or a 40,000 foot view to get a pulse of what's happening, I think there are 2 or 3 things that'll give you a good gist of what's happening. I think the first thing to look at is your lead velocity. So in other words, from the first touch to a suspect to a sales-ready lead, how long has it taken in the past? How long is it going to take? And what your process does to kind of minimize that time. Second is what we call revenue performance, which is clearly your conversion rate on the sales side. So in other words, if you're sending 100 leads over, what percentage of those are turning into quotes? When I say revenue performance, it's not always deals won. I mean, ideally, that's great. But at the end of the day, marketing can only control having good conversations and a quote. So ideally, you want to know how many quotes were generated for the number of, say, SQLs that you sent over. And then the last piece is your own ROI in terms of your marketing return on marketing investment. So in other words, can you keep your spend flat, but then optimize your performance where you can quantifiably show to sales, show to your executive staff that here are the changes you're making and here's how you're sharpening the pencil, and now you get them on board by just those 3 average metrics.
So that attribution of a lead to a source and then tracking to in sales seems to be something that we hear about a lot, right? Is that there was an initial advertising or marketing dollar spent. I love to see that person tracked all the way through the pipeline to business one, right? Why is that such a challenge, right? The actual attribution of actual business one and the dollars associated with it to, hey, hopefully I spent less on the advertising side and I won significantly more business. Where is that? Where are the gaps in that process right now? Because it seems to be an ongoing conversation of a measurement on the front end of a cost per lead or a cost per email address one, but to actually assign that to dollars one down the pipeline remains a challenge. Where do you think the gaps are and what can be done to rectify it? I know we've covered some of this, but I think that to me is kind of the gold standard question that I get asked constantly by our clients.
And we see this on a daily basis. I'm sure you do as well. I think the charity begins at home, right? So if you think about what is it that a marketing department controls in the first place, those are easier things to deal with. So again, it comes back to identifying the right platform. So in other words, if you have a particular CRM implementation or an ERP implementation, you want to make sure that the platform you choose can integrate appropriately. You want to know what your process is within the marketing team and what is the current sales process within the sales team, because you want to make sure that data can go back and forth. The second thing that we have seen provide significant value is when there is what we call an SLA, a service level agreement between marketing and sales teams, so that you kind of standardize data sets. Because sales, as we know, is not always prone to giving you the details that a marketing manager typically wants. And marketing manager is typically one who wants the details with regards to why is a lead being sent back, how good or bad the lead was. And you don't want subjective answers, right? So for example, if a salesperson responds with a lead back to, or reassigns the lead back to marketing saying, couldn't get through. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that the person tried 3 dials in 3 days and couldn't get through? Or did that person, over a period of 4 weeks and 3 emails and 4 phone calls across different days, different times? So it could mean different things to different people, even within one team, even within sales, different people operate with different standard operating procedures. So then for marketing to be able to interpret that becomes a bigger challenge. So if you have kind of a service level agreement between marketing and sales, so that when a salesperson gets a lead, they know exactly what they're getting and what each of those criteria mean. And same thing when sales reassigns the lead or provides feedback, if there's a standard way where it is kind of a drop-down way, then all of a sudden now you know that it's a lot easier, because first of all, if it's dropped down, they don't have to spend time and energy putting in essays and stuff like that. Plus, the best part is if it is selectable, more people fill out, and then you can run more reports, as opposed to having subjective answers where it's harder to run reports and stuff like that. So from our perspective, it's identifying the right platform so that it integrates into what you currently have, having an SLA so that both teams know what the input data set is and the output data set is, and then be able to have that more so in a drop-down kind of a format where they just have to point and click, and that becomes easier for people who's inputting the data on either side of the teams, or to run reports for you to understand what's happening over a period of time. So if you can kind of check those 3 boxes, it typically provides a lot of value and eliminates that problem.
So let's shift topics to content and kind of, you mentioned earlier the Ferrari, right? I mean, it's one thing to have the elegant system with all the capabilities, but if you don't have the gas in the tank, it doesn't make the Ferrari go. So content, just tell me a little bit about, you mentioned personalization, and really having a variety of content seems to be kind of a critical path item. Tell me a little bit about, why having a variety of content or refreshing your content with, educational content mixed in with sales and marketing related content, how that can be effective. In your experience, obviously content is important, but specifically speaking, kind of like the variety and kind of the refresh rate of content, what should marketers be focusing on with that?
So I'm just going to take one quick step back. Funny you mentioned that because
Mm,
actually in 2020, McKinsey came out with a
mm,
research which talked about how visibility is driving performance these days. And more so, it's
mm,
not just about blanketing everything all over the place. It's about relevant visibility. And you and I both
mm,
know, Pat, that engineers are very analytical in nature. They like details.
mm,
They want substance. And
mm,
research shows that strong voices resonate with engineers. So, in other words, if you have a story, if you have a particular technology platform, for example, predictive maintenance, if you play in that sandbox, partnering with somebody who is an editor, a publisher, like for example with CFE, for example, if you partner with CFE and you use their content, now you've got somebody who's an authority in the industry that drives credibility instantaneously. You take that content and now, for example, if you reposition it for your customer base, and let's say the CFE article was talking about predictive maintenance and trends in predictive maintenance, but you are targeting a mid-sized company. If you take that content and talk about how your company implements that solution within your mid-sized enterprise target market, now you're adding value, plus you're proving thought leadership to your end
mm,
customers because you're associating with the credibility that somebody like a CFE offers. So, number one
mm,
is trying to make sure you correlate with what's happening with the content authority in the industry. The second thing is you could take that content and again, you could be as sophisticated as you want, or you could do something that is a low-hanging fruit. For example, blogs. You could do blogs or social media by partnering with a partner like CFE. You could also look at what you serve in an email. You could come up with infographics, which are tidbits of information that you're proving to educate your customers. You could look at doing short videos, excuse me. So there are different ways you can just use one piece of data and then proliferate it across channels because in social media, for example, people want to absorb one or two small pieces. On a microsite, you might want to talk about it more extensively, and you might look at what a content author, an industry reputable source, has talked about, and talk about how you play within that sandbox, and you can be more elaborate from that perspective. So there are different ways. You could do ebooks, for example, publish
mm.
ebooks, and prove your credibility that way. So there are different ways you can use this content depending on how much bandwidth and time, energy, and effort you want to allocate to it.
Mhm. So tell us if you can, obviously, if it's proprietary, we understand, but tell me kind of walk us through a recent success from one of your clients
Okay.
that you've walked through, where whether it be a short form campaign, something that was 3 to 6 months, or something that's been going on kind of, multi-year or more of a long tail program. We're always interested in hearing. I think marketers learn from others in particular, see how other people have done it. It is a bit of a copycat industry, so to say. So I think they would really like to hear about somebody else who's had success with this type of approach.
So that's a good question. So I'll start out with one of the companies, and the reason I picked this company is because it's been a 12-month project. So typically, an ROI from an automation platform is about 6 to 9 months. It's fresh enough in terms of starting from scratch and showing results, but at the same time, it's not a 3-month project either. It's not an ad hoc
Mm,
campaign. So we work with a manufacturing company that specializes in building integrated robotics for packaging industry. And what
mm,
we did for them, their go to market plan was their engineering skill set. Their go to market plan was their expertise in the packaging industry to help reduce downtime. And like I said, for us, the paradigm has shifted from just quantifiable value proposition to qualitative value proposition as well. So what we did with them is we work with them to create an identity. We work with them to create a purpose for their brand. And in so doing, we created a microsite. So their website was more so an overview of the company. And think of that as something that is an inch deep and a mile wide. And it talked about the different verticals that they play in. Our focus specifically was packaging. So then we kind of built a microsite on packaging. So in other words, now the focus shifted from an inch deep and a mile wide to about an inch wide and a mile deep. On that microsite, we worked with different partners that released information, studies, and things like that to educate their target audiences, their engineers, in terms of zero downtime, in terms of helping with throughput, and so on and so forth. So that microsite allowed us to then use something like SEO, allowed us to do LinkedIn to drive traffic to that microsite and garner engagement. So now all of a sudden, it became a lead generation source as well. So after the first 3 to 6 months, we started generating leads through that microsite. In addition to that, we started using some of that content that was more industry-specific content, and we started using email marketing to start nurturing prospects. And again, they were targeting relatively larger companies in CPG. And as a result, of course, the runway was relatively longer. But now, a year in, what we've seen is their engagement rates are about 50 to 70%, which is phenomenal. I mean, typically in manufacturing, we see about 15 to 25% open rates. Their click-through rates are about 10 to 15%. And typically in manufacturing, we see about 1% to 2% click-through rates. So in that 1 year time, we've talked about how they can work in the context of the packaging industry. And going back to what I said about the value proposition and the qualitative things, we talk about, on that microsite, we talk about how responsive this team is, how they become an extension for the engineering team at a packaging company. We talk about how transparent they are. So in other words, we started publishing their supply chain issues. So for example, if they had to take a Yaskawa robot and customize it, they would now all of a sudden be transparent with regards to availability and stuff like that. And their end customers, their prospects like that. In fact, actually, we started seeing deals and bids come in where they were moving away from their current partners because the current partners couldn't fulfill the timeline. And they came back saying, you know what, you're telling us up front that you can't do it in 3 months or 6 months. I would rather have that so I can set appropriate expectations internally, and I know you will deliver at a certain point rather than somebody telling me what I want to hear. So we started winning bids that way as well. So my point being is that approach in terms of having a purpose, having a mission, that identity for a particular set of values that the company stands for, communicating that, coupling that with content that allows you to frame that content within the context of your target audience makes you somebody who's very trustable. And we believe in building trust first and then credibility. We believe credibility is just the ticket to the game. It's the ability to build trust first that becomes a differentiator. And that's basically changed the dynamics where their marketing spend for a year was flat, and their sales pipeline growth was over 175% in that 1 year, year over year. So that's a perfect case study in terms of how this implementation kind of pans out when the rubber meets the road.
Absolutely. That's a great way to kind of close out our conversation today, because I think that there's a lot that we covered here, obviously just scratching the surface. Full disclosure, CFE and StratMg, we work a lot together on different projects. We've got a long history. So there's a variety of ways that both our organizations can help. Strat is one of the experts in this field. That's why we had you on our Marketing Engineers interview series. Before we close out, any questions for me? Anything that you'd like me to answer? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and wrap it up for today.
No, I'm just curious from your perspective, where do you see 2021 going? Or what are you hearing from a spend standpoint and the challenges standpoint?
Sure. It's a good question. I've sat through a couple different kind of future-looking sessions. We belong to a group called Outsell, and they had some of their, kind of predictions for 2021, both at the end of 2020 and kind of early on here in the year. And the things that we're hearing from groups like Outsell and also in our experiences with our clients, especially kind of on my side of the business at CFE, which is our tech and services group, we're hearing a couple of things. One, we're seeing people reinvest in branding, right? I think that one of the things that was probably a welcome change for a lot of marketers was this, kind of nonstop demand before the pandemic of get new email addresses in the top of my funnel. I need new names. I need a certain number in the quarter. Sometimes they were realistic. Sometimes they were unrealistic. And we saw that people, didn't require as many new names at the top of the funnel because for two reasons. Number one, they had no ability to go call upon those people in person, right? A manufacturing plant might have been closed down to third-party vendors or service providers. It was only key employees. So the sales folks couldn't even go visit any of the new clients that they potentially won anyways. Obviously, the virtual sales process we're all living in now. We're on Zoom here today. I think everybody has gotten more familiar and comfortable explaining products and services over Zoom. But I think that what we're hearing from marketers is, okay, I don't need as many new names. I need to be better at nurturing them. So what does that entail? That entails, higher frequency of email communication, being active on social media, branding my company out in the trade publications and the media partners who are connecting with my target audience on a regular basis. So in other words, thought leadership, put a higher level of emphasis on thought leadership. So the level of nurturing, the level of investment in content marketing has increased significantly. We think events, come back probably second half to fourth quarter of the year is what we're hearing. And there'll be hybrid style events where there will be an audience that is expected to be able to stream the in-person event. I think that there was an exaggeration during the pandemic that COVID killed the in-person event, or that now that there's digital fatigue and there's no longer going to be virtual events. I think the future or the truth is probably somewhere in the middle between those. I think, in-person events are still hard to replace, right? There is still a personal connection. So we're seeing, from our side of things, branding, getting higher level of investment. We do think trade shows and events will come back probably second half of the year. I know from my side of our business that, our clients are coming to us and they're still looking for integrated solutions more than ever. So you mentioned an ad hoc program that's 3 months versus 12-month commitments or longer. We're starting to see that, and we welcome that because I think as a media tech and services organization like we are, we've got capabilities that funnel names all the way through all the entire buyer's journey, from branding through conversion to nurturing to actually sales ready. And I think that, Parin, I know you and I have spoke a lot about this. There is no silver bullet out there. I think the biggest misnomer with marketing automation is that it automates marketing by some degree. There's a lot of investment and constant maintenance, but I think sometimes the best advice I give to marketers is don't be afraid to try things, right? Go ahead and put the marketing automation through its paces, get it out there, let it work for you. Understand the data that you're looking at and iterate and try and, attempt new things. And, we welcome those types of changes in the marketplace. Obviously, we think marketers are critical at most organizations, and I think they've got a lot on their plate, but, I think with the folks at Strat or CFE, we'd be happy to help, solve some problems. If there's no other questions or anything, I want to thank you, Parin, for joining us here today. This is the first of its kind for us, an actual sit-down interview series. We'll post it and make it available online to anybody, and we'll share your contact information if people want to get in touch with you or with CFE. So thanks for joining today, and we'll be talking again soon.
Thanks, Pat. Pleasure, as usual.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks.